This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by Xero. As a listener of this podcast, you are probably keen on getting industry insights, staying ahead of leading-edge technology, and boosting your network. Well, I have some good news for you. This June at XeroCon 2019, Xero will bring together hundreds of tech-savvy, future-minded professionals just like yourself from across the Americas and the entire globe. Come join Blake, myself, in this collaborative community in action June 18th and 19th in San Diego. To receive a special discounted ticket to XeroCon 2019 in San Diego, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.com/XeroCon. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.com/XEROCON. Book your XeroCon ticket today and we'll see you in San Diego.
Welcome to the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I'm Blake Oliver.
And I'm David Leary.
And I'm Rachel Fish.
Whoa, hey, where'd you come from, Rachel?
It's like I snuck in through the speakers in the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I listen to you guys every week, and I sometimes agree and sometimes don't agree, but usually talk back. And now I feel like I need to be a little mindful that you can hear me now.
Oh, great.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. For everyone listening, Rachel is our first guest commentator on the Cloud Accounting Podcast, in charge of accountants and alliances at Sage over in the North. I just watched Game of Thrones, so I want to know, how is Winterfell doing, Rachel?
The thaw has begun. We're starting to see a little green grass. Yeah, no, we're good. But thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, and we look forward to hearing what you've got to share. But first, David.
So we got a review from the UK this week. Title of the review is Interesting. Despite living in the UK, it is interesting to hear what is happening in the US cloud accounting, and being about the cloud makes it relevant to all. The presenters are great at explaining.
I think this makes you guys international now.
Well, we are the number one accounting and bookkeeping podcast in the world.
Did we not hit number one in a certain category in Trinidad and Tobago? And we forgot to mention it.
That's awesome.
I think Kenya once, we got number 2, and Arab Emirates, we got number 3. So yeah, we're starting to take over things.
Very cool.
Yeah. Other than the reviews, David, I've seen you just all over Twitter asking questions, trying to find out what's going on. I mean, we had Tax Day, obviously, was on the 15th, right? So
welcome back to all our tax professionals.
Thanks for listening. We know that you're listening because our downloads have doubled in the last few days.
Unless you're Canadian, and then you're just kind of irate that everybody's celebrating back to after tax season, because we still have 2 weeks to go, guys.
So I only brought 2 stories this week because I just have one big story I kind of worked on, and arguably it's not even a story. I don't have a link oh, so-and-so covered this on a website. This is my story that I put together really via Twitter.
Investigative journalism right here.
Investigative journalism. So let's take a time machine back to January. So late January, episode 55, we talked about a company called Visor. They're a newer tech startup. They raised $9 million more for a total of $15 million. They were going to do people's taxes for $99.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
We were both impressed with their pricing page. You were paying for what you were getting.
Right.
You're just okay, I'm paying for a return, and I had cryptocurrency, and I had 2 1099s, and you're kind of saying what you had, and then they're quoting you a price. Super, super straightforward pricing. You and I were both impressed with the pricing page.
Yeah, I'm looking at it again to refresh my memory, and yeah, I really liked how it was a $99 base price, and then they just added another $99 if you fit these particular situations, such as being self-employed or selling stock or having rental income, just very easy for a non-accountant or non-tax person to understand.
So that was last January. Obviously, I knew of Visor, but I wasn't really watching or paying attention to anything. So Saturday morning, on April 13th, I got tagged in a Twitter. I wasn't even out of bed yet. I got tagged in a Twitter conversation by John Young, CPA. His Twitter handle is Accountable John. Visor was not being responsive, and the change started in February. It's February 22nd that Visor wasn't being responsive, and I don't know. It was Saturday morning, and I kind of blew it off. I was like, "Hey, is this even a tech issue?" And, in my opinion, Visor's just an accounting firm. This would be like calling another firm. If you don't get good service, move on to the next firm. Mm-hmm. Well, John Young corrected me, and he's like, yeah, but this is a little different, right? They've gotten $15 million in funding. They're a fintech. They're pitching as a tech-heavy solution for tax preparation. They're not responding, but I kind of see your point. But then he said, hey, give a search for Visor on Twitter. So I had a plan to do my own taxes on Saturday. So instead of doing my own taxes Saturday morning, I started doing searches on Visor on Twitter.
Well, this is a good procrastination technique.
I was just going to say Saturday, April 13th, and deadline is when?
The Monday. So but I find it ironic that instead of doing my taxes, I started researching an accounting firm that was doing other people's taxes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of work backwards in this timeline. So follow along with me. So I started looking and I started finding dozens of tweets from customers.
So these are irate customers on Twitter, like tagging Visor.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
And so a lot of it was they prepaid for a service, and some of them weren't hearing communications back from Visor for days, weeks, and months. Even as of April 12th, people were tweeting, Visor, I have a question I need an answer to today to file my taxes. I sent the question on my Visor account through your chat feature a week ago. Could you please get me some response today? Tweets like, Visor is the latest tax fraud in the making, ? Duping people of money in the pretext of filing taxes, then vanishing without responding to messages in the portal. No phone number to get in touch with, no email address. Also strongly not recommending that anybody sign up for Visor Tax. I paid 6 months in advance, uploaded all my documents a month ago. Now with 5 days to the deadline, there's no phone number, no return, nothing. Other tweets to this effect. So this is working backwards. Now we're going back to April 6th. People weren't getting responses, right? Yeah, I submitted my paperwork a month ago. I was told my taxes would be filed in 3 to 10 business days. Today, I got a message saying they can't get it done and they're going to file an extension.
And actually, the original thread that you were tagged on, the beginning of that was actually February 22nd. And even at that point, he was saying that it had been weeks before he'd been able to. So I feel like this thing kind of snowballed really close to the deadline, which is when people started getting really irate about it. But it actually looked like it had been going on for months already.
Absolutely. And then that's right. Yeah. So April 6th, April 3rd, and you're going all the way back to March 22nd. People tweeted things like, this is March 31st. Her name's Liz Wessel. She said, Visor, I can't tell if this is a scam anymore because your customer support is so slow, several days between messages. Is there anything I can do to have someone respond to any of my messages? Just trying to figure out if I need to switch to TurboTax before the taxes are due. Going back to March 12th, somebody said, I'd really like a refund. Coming up on day 7 and still nothing's been updated despite the apologies for the delay I was given. I really thought this would be a back and forth conversation with the CPA. Instead, it's an upload documents and wait a week type of a situation. So obviously, people had genuine concerns, right?
For sure.
100% of the communication was supposed to be done through the Visor app. So you have the Visor app, you take pictures of your tax returns to the Visor app, you communicate with your accountant or bookkeeper through the Visor app. But because the quote-unquote accountants were not responding back through the Visor app, and the fact that they had no email address available, no customer chat on the website, no help, no support ticket system, etc., folks started taking to Twitter. So that's kind of what has happened. Everything was on Twitter, which would be okay. But, you guys ready for the but?
Yes.
Visor's Twitter account went radio silent on March 28th.
Whoa.
And then on April 14th, started to respond to people. So that's April 14th is what? We're down to 48 hours before the tax deadline.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? Then on April 15th, spun up an email address, hi@visor.com, and started to provide people with an email address. When you're down to what's that, the last 36 hours of the tax season?
It's kind of nice that a tech company is actually making the service level at most tax firms look good right now.
Nice.
But it gets worse. We're now 36 hours of tax deadline, right?
Right.
Getting down to the last day. And then you start seeing other tweets of even more dissatisfaction. So this is on April 15th. Anybody else get taken in by the Visor ads? Have their quote-unquote advisor stop responding on 329? Spending today doing your taxes on TurboTax because you didn't know it was happening? File. Then you get a response from Visor that says they're working on your return while they ignored your 4 previous messages. There's other people. So it's tax day. So this was April 15th. So it's tax day. I still have no idea what the status of my taxes are. I thought that Visor sounded like an innovative way to do taxes, but after 1.5 months, I still have no idea if my taxes will be fully processed before April 15th. There's even a request on April 15th. This is Cornell Kidd. He's asking Visor, please do not file a tax return on my behalf. I sent you all my documents weeks ago and have not heard back once. Since taxes are due today, I file my taxes through a different service. I would like to request a refund immediately.
Yeah, this is not good.
No.
And they're not even really responding to this stuff, right?
No, not at all. No replies on
They started to barely responding. Okay, tax deadline's passed. I was waiting to see what's going to happen past the deadline. Right? I was like, that's when this becomes, in my opinion, a real story. Here's tweets from April 17th, which is 1 day past the deadline. Visor, it's past the tax day and my dashboard says it's still filing. I've received no confirmation that taxes were filed on time. Please help. No response from Visor. Another one. Visor, what kind of customer service is this? I prepaid all the fees, yet my taxes are not filed. No one is responding on chat. I even booked a call, but no one called. Third one, Visor, it's past tax day and my profile is in tax preparation, but no one is responding to my chat for the last 3 or 4 days. Help.
Wow.
So I'm kind of like, are you kidding? Like, what's your two feelings before we kind of move on? Because it actually gets better. But
part of me is wondering if this is like they took the money and ran.
Yeah, that there isn't even anything behind the scenes at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So the big deal is that they collected this money up front from these people. They took their tax documents. They said they would file, and then nothing happened.
Yeah.
That seems to be what's going on.
So here's where it really, this is what really, it gets better, right? So 2 months ago, their founder was on Forbes Books Radio. I'm going to quote their founder. So this is Gernot Zaki. He's the CEO and founder of Visor. We are charging our customers a fee that covers the majority of taxpayers in the United States. They would be falling into that $99 price point. What that also means is that we are going to be there for our customers, not only for filing, but year round. So you pay a $99 fee, but you get access to your tax advisor 24/7 for a year.
I mean, that's just insane.
That's completely unrealistic.
So
$99 a month, maybe, like a subscription service that also includes your tax filing, sure. But $99 for the whole thing, including filing, I don't believe it.
But that's the promise, right? Like it's this huge overpromise, right?
Yeah,
that's out there.
Absolutely.
But it gets better because not only did this firm's founder go out there and tell these things, so they got that big $15 million raise, right? And they obviously, everybody's seen their Facebook ad. I'm assuming you two have. I mean, they advertised the hell out of this.
You've never seen one?
Okay.
No, the algorithm is not working well, apparently.
It's apparently not for you guys. So, but yes, lots of Facebook ads have been ran, a lot of them. But they actually engaged an Instagram model to write a blog post on Vogue magazine. And it's just amazing pictures of her taking a photo of her W-2 with their app, chatting with her bookkeeper, her accountant or enrolled agent that was doing her taxes. And it's full spread. I mean, it's almost like ridiculous. I mean, I would love for us to get a Instagram model to pretend she's listening to the Cloud Accounting podcast or something. That would be great. So it's a little insane, right? And I understand like this tax season has been hard for everybody. I understand that maybe their tax professionals got overwhelmed because of the demand and the tax season.
Yeah.
I also assume they probably don't have as much AI built as they probably wanted to, or they had planned as much tech as they wanted, right? In a way, I almost even feel like that stuff is acceptable. In a way. The part I don't understand is how you took this VC money, paid an Instagram model to promote it, ran billions of Facebook ads, but didn't spend any money like on an intern to respond to people's inquiries, even on Twitter, or set up an email address until 24 hours before the tax deadline. Now you set up an email address. Like it's understandable why the customers have lost their minds and have just lit them up on Twitter like they have.
Oh, for sure.
Well, so just listening to this story, David, what it sounds like to me is having watched the Fire Festival documentary on Netflix, that these guys, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have systems and processes in place or the experience even to really know what they were doing. And they got way in over their heads. Demand exceeded their expectations and they couldn't handle it. And instead of being upfront with people and giving them their money back and saying, we can't do your taxes this year, they just took it.
Well, they are refunded. I saw some tweets. They have refunded some people's money.
Oh, okay.
People who've requested refunds have gotten refunds.
So tell me about this. Gernot Zaki, that's the name of the CEO, right?
He's one of the founders. Yep.
Does he have a tax background or an accounting background?
No, he came up through the tech world.
Okay, and like, does anybody running this company have a background in professional services?
So that's the divide, right? So they have their tech, right? Kind of that Bay Area. It's the founder, the engineers, the app, right? The VCs. And then they have the CPAs and EAs are basically in Atlanta.
Do we know if they're contractors or employees or? So
I can get into that in a second because I did wind up checking the Glassdoor reviews. But on Wednesday, I actually reached out to their founder on LinkedIn and sent him a message. And I just explained to him, okay, I've been watching the drama unfold on Twitter, right? And I even said, like, as of even 6 minutes ago of me writing this, somebody said their taxes were not filed. And I said that I'll discuss this in the podcast, but I asked for some official Visor statement. And he said there was an official Visor statement, but they're working hard to improve things going forward. So I checked the Glassdoor reviews. They have 1.8 stars. And it's very clear there is a division and arguably dysfunction between the San Francisco part of the company and the CPAs and EAs that are in Atlanta. And it looks like, based on some of the reviews, they even got rid of 8 accountants in early February.
That's not a good time to be getting rid of your talent, right? Like if they're the ones who are supposed to be doing this work.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's going to be legal implications because people's things weren't filed. There's accusations that you didn't even have a CPA or EA sign your return. So in the Glassdoor reviews, people are reporting that, hey, there's no more CPAs or EAs there. They're not currently preparing returns. And then taking this full story back to John Young, who is a CPA, he was actually going to use this service. He tested it with his own personal taxes.
Sorry, who's John Young?
Oh, John Young is the person I started this whole story with who tagged me in the original tweet.
Oh, got it.
And so John Young, he's a CPA. He was going to try and use technology or this service to push off clients onto. Mm-hmm. So he could focus on higher value clients, right? But he tested it with himself and it didn't go too well. So he confirmed with them that a CPA is preparing and signing all the returns based on their message, right? He went and looked in CPA Verify for his preparer. They're not listed in there.
Not cool.
And just to close on this whole thing, this one tweet from Visor kind of takes the cake as far as like tech company cockiness. A customer was complaining on Twitter, and the customer said, "You're not there yet. My taxes are unnecessarily stressing me out when I could have just gone to an actual CPA for $50 more than what I paid." And the Visor Twitter account at that time on March 12th said, "I do apologize for the delay in preparing your taxes. $99 for a CPA to do taxes is an extraordinary offer, and we've seen significant demand." But this is where the part of that tweet is kind of cocky. If you find an actual CPA to do your taxes for $50 more, in parentheses, while offering audit protection, please let me know.
Wow.
Like, it was super, super cocky, like, to respond to a customer like that. And then obviously, like, they failed at their fundamental promise, right? And maybe they've done thousands of returns, right? So I was actually feeling out on Twitter too. Like, there's people that are like, "Oh, I've been doing taxes for 20 years. And maybe twice I've had a return miss a deadline because, some internal process in our company and we missed the return or whatever it might be."
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen, even my years of working in Intuit, in TurboTax, who does 40 million tax returns. I don't feel like I've ever seen this much disdain.
So when Visor posted this tweet about the cockiness, that was actually back on March 12th. I'm a little curious as to what happened to their cockiness between March 12th and April 15th. They certainly weren't at the point to be able to do that at that point, and let alone how it goes. But I think that, first of all, I've got questions. First, the question is, were they doing any kind of beta testing through last year's season so that they can see what the level of demand would be, their ability to scale, like if it was even possible? Or is this just something that's popped up within the last 6 months and they just decided to fire it up?
Apparently last year, people were tweeting they had some good experiences with it last year. I think it was obviously smaller scale. They didn't go as big, but so people did use this last year.
Yeah.
But when did they raise all the money?
The second round, I want to say, was in December or October.
Yeah.
Okay. So like in 2018.
Yes.
So before this tax season.
I'm guessing that they spent all the money on, or a lot of the money on advertising. They created a huge amount of demand. They couldn't satisfy that demand. That's just my guess.
Yeah. But then they also had internal dysfunction, obviously. If in February you're getting rid of 8 of your accountants and CPAs, like unless they underestimate their demand, like, "Oh, we're not going to get much demand. Like, we don't need these extra 8 CPAs," because obviously they probably needed 8 more bodies.
Well, I think that this is one of those, where tech meets service, right? I think that customer service and communication are the two things in any company that are the hardest to scale. So sure, AI can help with bookkeeping, or sure, AI can help with tax returns, and sure, it's still putting numbers in boxes, but that part of the organization that's the hardest to scale, like, are these tech companies that are raising all this money really preparing for those things that are the hardest to actually deliver? That's where I see these things fall down, like all over the place, right?
I think 100%, Rachel, and they don't know how to prepare for it because in the tech world, you don't have to provide a lot of service, right?
Yeah,
and especially with modern SaaS tools, you can create an app that's easy to use, and you really don't have to spend a lot on customer support. Maybe it's 90% my app and 10% on helping people use it. In professional services, that's flipped.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It is. Yeah,
and the arrogance. I can't remember who used that word, or the cockiness. Right? It's like these tech people think that services are easy.
Yeah,
and it's just a bunch of structured data. And I have a story about that. If we just add some automation and AI, we can disrupt this entire industry.
And I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that there is a place for tech within professional services, but I think that on the tech side of things, they severely underestimate value of the part that professional services people do provide.
And you would think that maybe they would get somebody as a co-founder who has done it before, right?
You think.
Who has run a tax firm maybe?
Yeah.
Or a bookkeeping firm or something.
So I spent all the time on that. And then finally, the next day, I decided to do my taxes. So I'm waiting until the last possible day to do my taxes. It was great. I used to work.
Yeah. So just to be clear, this is now April 14th and the deadline is April 15th.
Yes. So, but remember when we were talking about QuickBooks Live, Blake? And I said, hey, I want to sign up for TurboTax Live so I can kind of give this a ride. I want to talk to Claudel, right? So I signed up for TurboTax Live months ago, right? I've been really procrastinating, to do my taxes at the end. I do all my taxes. It was fine. I'm paying for TurboTax Live. I get to the very end of my return and they offer me to do a review. And it's Claudel's picture. And absolutely, I ran and got my headset from the other room. I'm like, I'm going to talk to Claudel. I was super excited. But then I got a message that it says, our tax experts are booked through the deadline, but we've got you covered with simple extension if I need to file an extension, so no late fees or whatever. But I didn't need to file extension. I could just file and return. So I was a little bit sad that I didn't get to talk to Claudel. But I think there's a couple of things in here. Obviously, demand for people and doing your return with people is huge. Mm-hmm. And I think when it's all said and done, I know TurboTax was happy with their numbers last year and who it was when they talked about TurboTax Live. Remember in your blog post, Blake, you went back and researched that from the conference calls with the street. I think you're going to see insane numbers. It's very, very obvious. People see value in spending $169 for their tax return and be able to talk to live video chat with somebody. Mm-hmm. And it was nice. I tweeted about it with some tears. Intuit reached out, and after actually asked to refund my TurboTax Live part, but I said no, it's all right because I get it for a year. So I will talk to Claudel soon. So I'm keeping it for the rest of the year. I will have a TurboTax Live experience with Claudel, hopefully.
I just think that it is still important to know the who's behind all of this stuff. With the Glassdoor reviews where he's basically saying there are no CPAs or EAs here. They are not the ones that are doing your taxes. So someplace like the Department.tax, where that there are qualified and, good CPAs and tax preparers and EAs behind the scenes. I just think I don't know, everybody wants the clickbait, cheap price for what I need to have done. I don't know. There's still quality behind that.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah. And
this goes back to the whole BotKeeper story. I'm not going to dredge that up. If you are an accounting professional looking to outsource this type of work to a tech company, make sure you ask them who's actually doing the work, right?
Absolutely.
Like Rachel said, are these EAs, are these CPAs, where are they located? How do you compensate them? Are they employees? Are they contractors? We need to do that due diligence on behalf of our clients.
And that's it. I beat my 2 stories. We're done. I didn't do my taxes. I researched Visor, and then I did my taxes.
And you didn't get to talk to Claudel.
And I didn't get to talk to Claudel, which was really, I was really excited because I was like, oh, this is sweet. The offer's there. And I clicked on it, and then I got to the next screen, and I was like, oh, what bummer. They're all booked up, which I could understand. It's the last tax day. There's no more. Oh, well, that's kind of how that went. Did anything else happen this week? Because that's all I worked. I had 2 stories.
So I've got a follow-up to that, but I think we should take a little break. And Rachel has a bit of more positive news, I think.
I do.
Rachel, I'd love to hear about that. And then we can maybe go back to these tech companies failing. I love this story about Zoom.
Yeah, so good news for Zoom this week, raised its IPO price range to $33 to $35 a share and could be valued at $8.98 billion. And there are other, Pinterest, of course, their IPO is this week as well. Caveat, I'm not an investor. This really isn't my space. As, an accounting professional and now working, at a tech company, I am really confused about why a webinar app, basically like a screen share. I pop on Zoom all the time. I send the Zoom link, when doing screen shares. I use it to, record little instructional videos. But how it's possible to have a potential valuation of almost $9 billion.
Oh, could I take this one?
Absolutely.
Here's why. Zoom is a profitable company. They've been a profitable company since I think month 8th or 9th.
Which is also rare of an IPO or of a company raising a ton of money, which I also don't understand, right? Yes,
and compare them to the Lyft IPO or the Uber IPO that's going to happen.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Those companies are going to be $100 billion valuations, and they've never made a profit.
With no profit, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're in less of a deficit than they were the year before. It's like, I'm sorry, the badge? Like, I don't know what to do with that.
So my take is, obviously there's a lot of factors in Zoom's stock price and their success, but I just feel like the trend toward allowing people to work remotely is what is driving their success. Right. And, I've tried everything. I've used GoToWebinar, I've used GoToMeeting, I've used Citrix, various other products, and like Zoom has the best video audio quality.
They do, yeah. That's good.
And so, like, if you're meeting with people remotely and you want to have that video, there's nothing better.
Yeah.
And everywhere I go, I'm lucky I've been able to use it. It's kind of amazing to me that these other companies haven't yet been able to figure out how to do video that doesn't stutter.
Right.
They just released a feature that allows you to get recording consent in the actual platform. So I can make sure that everybody who's on the video that I'm recording has clicked to say they consent. And now I've got that documented, which is really important in some states.
Yeah, in
right?
California it is. Yep.
Yeah, California you have to get
both sides,
bidirectional consent.
Interesting though, because it came up in one of the Facebook groups, and I forget which one it was, where it was basically, okay, Zoom is going IPO. Now, what do we use besides Zoom? And I was like, why do you have to not use Zoom? It's like, well, now it's going to be this big corporation and they're going to want to triple their prices. And I don't want to deal with, huge companies that are all about profit. But
hopefully, I don't know if Zoom has a lot of room to raise prices. It's not like we're all using Zoom for $6 a month and they have a lot of room. I mean, it's already kind of expensive. I mean, if you're committed to using it, you're committed to using it. And if you're like, I need to do a webinar, now I'm paying an extra $40 a month, right? So I don't know if they have a lot of room to raise the prices. It's already decently priced. But what I think is another thing Zoom has is Zoom's done a good job of, I'm a little sole proprietor, an independent guy. There's a Zoom plan for me. Yeah. But even a huge company gets Zoom and they got the conference thing and it's hooked into the rooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Really solving for all market sizes, right?
And they've been able to do that because they make the app easy to set up and configure so they don't have to spend a lot on customer support. And if you don't have to spend a lot on customer support, then self-service, then you can make plans for small firms and plans for enterprise companies.
Yeah. Very cool.
I'm a big fan. Let's see. I have a little follow-on to, we were talking about online tax prep that didn't quite work so well. Overall, though, online tax filing is on the rise, according to a stat that I spotted in Accounting Today. It's interesting. It's a story that was published on April 15th, but it's using data from the previous tax year, from the 2018 filing period for 2017 returns. This is data provided by Experian and Axiom. There's a lot of stats in here, but the one that really drew me to it was, quote, when breaking down tax filing methods by age groups, those 65 years old and over were found to be the most likely to use walk-in tax services. No surprise there, right? Compared to a scant 3.7% for those aged 21 to 29.
That was a huge difference. I don't know what the percentage was for the 65 years old, but that's...
So you're saying no young people are seeing, nobody in their 20s is seeing a Liberty tax person dressed up on the side of the road flipping a sign and being like, that seems like a place I want to do my taxes at, and they just pull over their car and get their taxes done. Like, that's not happening.
We're talking less than 4%. So I don't know. I'm not a particular risk taker when it comes to the stock market, but if you're listening and you like to pick stocks, I would say short Liberty tax right now. Go long on that, because if 4%, less than 4% are using it that are in their 20s, who's going to be using it in 10, 20 years?
I take back my because I think we talked about this with the Intuit earnings a few months back. And I think even in then I said, if you follow these trends, in 10 years, tax stores will be gone. But if the numbers are already this low,
I think it'll be less than 10.
3.7, they might be gone faster than that.
And this is why Visor probably had crazy demand, because people want to file online. They just want to snap a picture of their W-2, right? Answer a few questions via chat and get it done.
You want the experience that the Instagram model had. Absolutely.
Yes.
Do they just not have enough options? Are there not enough online tax filing methods to be able to do that?
Well, there's the big ones, right? You got TurboTax, you got H&R Block, but I think so those are the self-service online options for the most part, right? Although TurboTax now has that live component, you still have to fill it all out yourself.
Yeah, the do it for me, do it with me stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so the do it for me online is the next, untapped potential, right? If somebody can figure that out and, actually keep their customers happy, then that'll be the next TurboTax.
And actually have EAs and CPAs doing the returns, yeah.
But it's tough because it's the price. Right.
Yeah. And the do it for me is very service heavy. Right. And you can't just put people into a box. That's probably what broke down too. Right. You can't just not everybody's the same. People are all different. And that's why there are accounting firms. Cool. Well, here's the story that really relates to what you were talking about, David. Spotted this in Fortune magazine. Apparently, Pilot, they describe themselves as an AI accounting service. Pilot has raised $40 million from Index Ventures and also includes Stripe, which is interesting. Online payments giant Stripe has become a strategic investor in Pilot. And Pilot, by the way, is online bookkeeping. Much like Visor is for tax, Pilot is for bookkeeping. They use QuickBooks as their general ledger, and you can subscribe to a flat monthly fee package for them to do all of your bookkeeping on a cash or accrual basis. Looks like anywhere from a couple $100 to $1,000 a month kind of plans. The thing that really struck me about this article was the quote from their CEO, Wasim Daher, Daher, not sure how you say that. He said, "What is bookkeeping? It's a series of structured data, dates, amounts, and so on, but it still involved the incredibly laborious process of people clicking around in QuickBooks."
See,
So that's his definition of bookkeeping.
This to me is like, because it goes back to what we were talking about, the challenge with, that blend of tech and service. Yes, functionally, it's numbers and boxes, right? Tax returns, bookkeeping, whatever. But it's that service component that these tech companies are severely underestimating. And when I read that quote, I was like, okay, so you also don't get it.
I think there's actually 3 stories in this story. So one of them is you take this 40 million and now Pilot, and I call these accounting firms with engineers under roof, right? That's what they are, right? They're accounting firms with engineers. They're automating processes. They're building, if you want to, okay, fine, they're building AI, they bots, whatever you want to call this stuff, right? But it's an accounting firm with an engineers under roof. In the last year to year and a half, I think, and in this counts like the bench raises, and Ceteris had a $40 million or $30 million raise. You start adding those up, a BotKeeper would add 18 million, I think.
Yeah, Scale Factor had some too, right? Like these are all.
Yeah, so you're approaching 300 million in VC money that's gone to accounting firms. Process that for a second.
No.
They're accounting firms with engineers, but they're essentially accounting and bookkeeping firms. That's one of the stories here. The other story of this, it was kind of a little sentence. They announced that they're starting a product called Pilot Tax. So obviously they're getting into that same game Visor is and TurboTax Live is and everybody else is, right? Which is very interesting. And I think the third part of this story is the fact that Stripe's involved. So you know how I've talked about in the past that, hey, Square is kind of doing everything. Right? If they had a GL, they're a full-blown thing. Stripe in the same way. Stripe, I know, acquired about a year and a half ago. I think the company was called Payable. It was software to help people to do some processing with the 1099s. Because apparently if you do a lot with Stripe stuff, you might have to deal a lot with 1099s, or Stripe has to do a lot of 1099s work. And they bought a company to help with the processing of 1099s. So is Stripe heading down that path that Square had?
Yeah, totally.
Hey, people are using us. Hey, it's very easy. I'm going to do your books. I'm going to do your taxes. I'm going to help you with 1099s. And all of a sudden, Stripe becomes this full service thing. And then it's like, oh, when does there a Stripe GL? Is that next? So there's kind of 3 stories here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
The part that's curious to me is that Pilot is based on QuickBooks. So at what point are they then a competitor to QuickBooks, right? If they are leveraging this other beast that, frankly, could at any time say, yeah, no, we've got our own thing. We don't want to connect with you. Or is it, at what point will they compete? We've seen QuickBooks compete with their own pro advisors, for Pete's sake. So at what point do you kind of cut the apron strings?
Well, this clearly is QuickBooks. This is QuickBooks Live right here. It's broader scope of services, but they will be competing with each other. So
then they must at some point have a plan for their own GL so that conflict isn't in place. Doesn't that make sense?
Well, they talk about in the article, it's a huge risk, right? To have all your client data on some other software and that.
But it's a risk, but it's also not a risk, right? You can compare and contrast, right? Bench, who does everything on their own proprietary system. And then you look at let's say, okay, we talked about TurboTax Live, and obviously the numbers thus far have been, it's a huge success. And I have zero doubt QuickBooks Live is not going to be a monster success, right? What if the demand is so huge for QuickBooks Live that Intuit can't scale it fast enough? If somebody like Pilot already has processes built on QuickBooks, it can be very easy. And Pilot, arguably, that's a pro advisor. they could easily partner with somebody like Intuit and offer the QuickBooks Live service behind the scenes, right? But somebody who is not built on the QuickBooks GL, right, under the covers, could not probably partner like that. So there's risk of it being competitive, but it also could be a partnership in the long term.
I think this is a wait and see on that part of it. But again, they're not doing anything that other firms aren't already doing, like what you said, like BotKeeper and Bench and Ceteris and Scale Factor and stuff like that. But what I thought was interesting, I've got another article here that says Eide Bailly is acquiring a data analytics service. So in that vein of, that accountant and tech, overlap, is that in most cases where we see, the pilots and the scale factors and the bench and stuff like that, in many cases, it's like a tech company who's seeing the opportunity in accountants and so feel they need to hire some accountants in order to do that. Like sometimes it's not accountant driven. It'll be really interesting to now see, because large firms and big four firms are doing the exact same thing. It's like when you look at the landscape, everybody wants to offer cloud accounting bookkeeping services. Everybody wants to automate the bookkeeping part so that they can add advisory, like across the board, right? So it'll be really interesting to see then when you've got a firm the size of Eide Bailly, then buying up technology companies, how easy it is that they're going to be within the culture, within the organization itself, to really be shifting to fill this need that we see everywhere else, but in more of a model where, again, it's not tech driving accounting, it's accountants leveraging tech, like right within the organization. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
So just to rephrase this to make sure I heard you correctly, the accounting firm bought a data analytics and data warehousing company, not a tech company buying an accounting firm.
Right. Yeah. And in this case, it was data analytics. But I mean, I think that we're just going to continue to see, like we've seen, for example, big four firms buy cloud accounting, those smaller organizations that do automated bookkeeping. Blake, you might know something about that. So we've seen that. But at this point, they're now actually buying the technology company itself. And so I thought in this case, it's data analytics, but I think we're also going to continue to see more of that, where the large firms are buying the technology that will then drive processes within the firm, especially big ones.
Opposite true, right? Blake, didn't Indinero acquire, was it M Accounting?
They did, yeah. So
which was a QuickBooks firm. So
modern brand, online services, doing QuickBooks bookkeeping and accounting and tax.
For sure. And from all sizes and every combination you can think of, whether it's tech buying accounting or accounting buying tech, and all sizes.
Well, speaking of technology, and we just, had our tax day here in the States, the IRS has released a 6-year plan to finally modernize their aging computer systems.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's like a 6-year plan is going to be obsolete by year 3.
So we've talked in the past about the IRS and how they have some of the oldest computer systems in the federal government here.
Wow.
That date back to the Kennedy administration. I can't remember if it's as old or older than the computer systems that guide our nuclear missiles, but it's scary, kind of in both ways. You may be asking yourself, what is included in this modernization effort? This is called the IRS Integrated Modernization Business Plan, and it is expected to cost between $2.3 billion to $2.7 billion over 6 years through fiscal year 2024. They're focusing it around 4 modernization pillars. Number 1 is taxpayer experience. So they want to implement systems to help taxpayers understand the tax laws and resolve issues quickly and efficiently. They're going to give taxpayers more information about their accounts, tax obligations, and payment options online. They're going to evolve their core tax systems to offer faster, easier tax filing services. They're going to modernize their operations. I imagine that means getting rid of those mainframe computers that they've still got. And they're going to work on their cybersecurity, which has still been a big problem with tax refund fraud. David, remember we talked recently about how they only manually check refund checks?
That's crazy to me.
Or they only manually...
They're over 2 million.
Yeah, like, so maybe they'll implement, some sort of internal control that like doesn't print the check without a human verification. Oh yeah, and they're still printing and mailing checks, of course. I imagine that in a couple of years we'll come back and we'll find that they've spent all the money and nothing's happened.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to be too
this
negative.
Is 25 episodes. Like we're gonna be like this is fodder. Like this is gonna be great to watch.
This is Phoenix in Canada and Fiscal in California all over again, right? Like
They did call out one specific feature that I think people will really like, which is implementing customer callback technology. So, you don't have to stay on hold anymore, that they'll call you back when an agent is available.
If you can catch the phone at that exact moment, otherwise you're hooped anyway.
That's true. Well, what else do we got this week?
I was inspired, Blake, by your passionate discussion with BotKeeper, and where you were trying to stress the importance of the value of the CPA, and that you guys there are things that they need to uphold to. There are things that they need to do and agree to as part of the CPA. So there's an article in PR Web, I believe, where it's actually promoting a webinar where there will be a virtual strategic discussion. But the whole point of this webinar, and this will be in the show notes so that you guys can sign up, it's not going to be until Tuesday, May 7th, so you've got a little bit of time, where it's basically the whole conversation is going to be about the relevancy of the CPA credential itself. So are CPAs as relevant as what they have been in the past? Is it as important to make sure that you are partnering with the CPA through your business and everything like that? Or is the CPA credential itself maybe losing a little bit of luster? Like I'm kind of afraid that the technology that is reinforcing, CPAs are signing off on this and CPAs are checking this. It feels like to me that it's kind of diluting maybe the importance of what a CPA is able to do for you, or maybe they're just getting called out that maybe they shouldn't be held as in high regard as they are. I'm not really sure what to think about this, but I thought it was at least an interesting discussion. What are your points, Blake, as a CPA?
Yeah, as a CPA, right, the value of the license is very important to me because I spent so much time and money on it. I talk a lot about, in my presentations, about the difficulty in hiring and retaining and recruiting talent in the accounting world.
Yeah.
And one of the stats that I bring up is the flatlining of CPA candidates over time. It's not like it's gone down, but it hasn't gone up in the way that you would think it would with growth, right? With economic growth, with population growth. We're not producing any more CPAs than we did 10, 20 years ago, it seems like. And I wanted to know why. So I finally figured it out. It appears that a lot of folks are now actually taking the CMA exam and becoming CMAs instead of CPAs these days. So a certified management accountant as opposed to public accountant.
Yeah. And CMA, that was actually what I was going for. And then Canada introduced the merging of all the designations. And then anyway, all hell broke loose. No, I'm kidding. It was fine. It was fine. But some people benefited more than others. But there was I think it goes right along with what you're saying. So Elizabeth Kolar, Chief Knowledge Officer at Surgeon, there's a quote in here: nearly every year for the past decade, the number of accounting graduates across the U.S. has risen, while the number of candidates sitting for the CPA exam has either remained flat or declined. And in some years that has been substantial. So it's like the education that you get within the process is super valuable, but the actual achieving those numbers behind those letters behind your name actually aren't. And so that's interesting that we're not seeing a flat line across the board, but there is a difference between the number of, that are entering the program or even completing the program and then the ones sitting for the exams.
Well, and the folks who administer and choose the curriculum, well, not choose the curriculum, but choose what's going to be on the CPA exam have a really hard time because the CPA exam is enshrined in state law in all 50 states in most cases. So if you want to change the exam, you have to change the law, which is not easy to do in 50 different
things, right? So then we know that the law isn't keeping up with the technology and with things that are actually happening within the industry. And yet you can't change the designation until the law changes. So then we end up with all of these CPAs that come out, are now designated accountants, get into the workforce and go, whoa, what's this whole data automation thing? So that has to shift. It has, but if it's not at the education level because it can't because of the state law, how is it even possible to start making that shift?
Yeah, well, and that's the risk, is that if we don't figure out how to do it, then other designations will come along and eat our lunch.
Yeah.
And I actually did talk to somebody from the AICPA. I can't remember who. It was at the AICPA Controllers Conference. And he said that their plan is to actually not change the sections of the exam because that is part of what's in law, but to work around it by keeping the same section titles and then changing the content in each section to potentially have different tracks. So there could be like a more technical accounting track for your CPA exam,
Right.
or you could do a more technology focused one, and the questions would change in each section depending on that.
But they would still fulfill the state requirements for those sections.
It would exactly, because in law, all that matters is you pass that particular section, right? So it's a workaround. I don't know. I'm not that optimistic, though, given how quickly things change and how slow. I mean, there was an article that I was going to talk about changes to the CPA exam that are coming. It's so boring. I mean, the big change that just happened is that now you can use Microsoft Excel on the CPA exam. It's like built into the app.
So this is the groundbreaking, innovative solution.
Yeah. Well, we're catching up to 20 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, the fact is that there's a ton of opportunity, as you know, as David, as you know, as Rachel, as you know, but we have to teach ourselves. But I think this is something that's happening in all professions, that like all the opportunity, academia can't keep up, right? Things are changing too fast. Like, just like you said, Rachel, the IRS is going to modernize in 6 years, theoretically, and in 6 years, it'll be outdated again, right? I think our entire model of education is broken, and we really need to focus more on creating lifelong learners, people who can teach themselves, more than people who memorize specific pieces of information, because I can Google anything that I learned in school and, find out the answer.
Yeah. And actually,
but a lot of people don't know how to Google.
Well, that actually goes right to, so the next article that I had pasted, just to kind of support this from a more broad level, is Harvard Business Review, The Future of Leadership Development. Essentially, it's saying exactly that. Our schools are not delivering the level of education that we now need within the workplace, but we're also seeing disjointed between the leadership of these organizations, especially when you're dealing with large firms, the partners and all of those guys, and then the ones that are, the millennials that are coming through. 80% of the workforce will be millennials within the next 5 years, and they want to be leading. So how can we develop now a level of leadership or leadership training that will really help them lead in the best possible way, or have them start framing what lifelong learning looks like, but within these organizations that have kind of these old school partners. So it was a really interesting article, but kind of goes to support, I don't know, maybe not for other people, but for me, it was really interesting because it went to support, okay, this isn't just happening with accountants. This is happening across the board, and it is something that needs to be fixed. And so what are some of the things that we can be incorporating into each of our industries or markets, or, the spaces that we're in, to make sure that we're continuing that lifelong learning process?
I don't think anyone really has an answer at this point. And
I wish I did. I could raise some funds.
Well, I don't even think you need to. Apparently, from everything I've read, if you just use the words AI powered, automated, blockchain, accounting,
got it.
You just put those words on like 5 different slides in a PowerPoint, you can go raise like $18 million.
Done.
So, and I will happily be your co-founder if you want to.
Awesome.
David, anything else that you wanted to talk about this week? Because I actually got to get going to a meeting. So we've been having so much fun talking. I forgot.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. I pretty much beat it all in 2 articles. Maybe next week I'll bring something that overflowed from this week. But I think I'm good. I would say if any of you are listening and you did use Pilot and your taxes were not filed, please reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at David Leary.
And I'm at Blake T. Oliver. And Rachel, how can people connect with you?
I'm on Twitter at Fishbooks.
And don't forget to follow the Cloud Accounting Podcast on Facebook. Find our Facebook page, Cloud Accounting Podcast. You can also subscribe to my email newsletter. Go to cloudaccountingpodcast.com, click the subscribe banner, and you will receive the show notes emailed to you the day after each episode drops. And that way you'll have all the links there in your email to follow up on anything that you really enjoyed. And give us a review on iTunes and we will read it on the air. So take it as an opportunity to compliment us. Take it as an opportunity to tell us what you think.
And how co-hosts are the best things ever.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being our first co-host, good guest co-host. It was really fun.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah. No pressure.
Well, have a great week. And David, I'll see you back here again on Friday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.